Welcome back to the Psychedelic Mom podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Carlin. First, I want to say I'm just going to start off with a disclaimer that everything on this podcast is meant for entertainment use only. This podcast is not to be taken as medical advice or recommendations due to the widespread illegality of psychedelics and earth medicines. You need to do your own homework. You need to do these medicines where they're legal. That being said, this conversation today is with someone who is anonymous, working underground in the United States. And I'm thrilled to have this conversation because I believe, as you know, that psychedelics and earth medicines should be legal or they should be reclassified as sacred medicines, and that we all should have the sovereign right to use these medicines. And if you've ever taken an earth medicine, a psychedelic, you know, whether it's been ayahuasca or iboga or mushrooms or DMT or 5-MeO-DMT or peyote or San Pedro, that there seems to be a common thread in the experiences in some ways, that many of these medicines are calling us back to something within us. Some would call it a true nature. So in some ways, it's been hard to have conversations with people that I know are serving underground, and yet they won't speak about it on air. We have to have the conversation end, and then we have these deep conversations about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. And you know what? The underground in the United States has more data than the clinical trials in a lot of ways. They're creating their own ceremonies. They're using combinations of medicines. I know that the clinical trials and the underground are like a revolving door. Some people that are working as therapists in the clinical trials also work underground. In the pursuit of truth in this space, I am bringing you this conversation about what it's like to serve 5-MeO-DMT. As you know, I also serve 5-MeO-DMT on retreats, not in the United States. I'm going to try to bring more conversations from the underground. What is it like to be a facilitator? 5-MeO-DMT is a profound medicine. Many people have wild experiences on 5-MeO-DMT, from birth experiences to death experiences to ecstatic orgasmic experiences. So we're going to dive into what that looks like, what it's like to hold that space. This is going to be a 2-part series. Rose is on today, and she's going to share what she has seen in her experiences. And I'm going to invite also the person that she works with back to talk about 5-MeO-DMT, what it's like to serve medicine with another person, what's happening in the underground, how does the underground build community to support each other and to get more stories and case studies of serving 5-MeO-DMT. And if you haven't had a chance, please leave me a review. I just am posting now a new newsletter that comes out weekly as well called Micro Messages. And in that, it's tips from guests that I host. So it might be a research paper that's new coming out, a gift for you, or some bit of wisdom or insight from my guests, or a practice that they'd like to provide you. So definitely subscribe to my channel. Enjoy the show. I am so excited today to be here with Rose. Rose is actually here with us anonymously. One of the things that I've really wanted to do on the Psychedelic Mom podcast is to have some real authentic conversations about medicine. And it's interesting because when you're on this psychedelic path, one of the things I feel like medicine is teaching us is authenticity and honesty. That's definitely been part of my path, a deeper understanding of who I am and how to be truly authentic, not bypass some of my own needs, and to be potentially a better communicator. Still working on that one. So it's been interesting and a bit of a struggle to be doing a podcast that actually doesn't really lend to true authenticity and honesty, because psychedelics are still illegal in the United States in most places. So sometimes I'll turn off record, and the best conversations happen after, when really people are talking about what they're really seeing, what really happens. We have an opportunity to ask real questions today from Rose, who is serving 5-MeO-DMT underground. And this is a medicine that's been so important in my life and the lives of those that I have served. So, welcome here today.
Thank you. It's really an honor and a blessing to be here with you. I'm really delighted.
I would do a bio typically, but we will skip the bio. You are anonymous here, brave enough to talk about this experience of your own journey with 5-MeO DMT and now in service to others. So let's start with your own journey.
I came to this medicine accidentally. So I don't think there's really any accidents, but I had never heard of it. I wasn't really seeking a psychedelic experience. I had experimented some in college, which was 20 years ago. And then I had a friend who had had a very transformative experience. My friend had been in some sort of a rough spot in their life. They were doing cocaine and they were in a marriage that wasn't serving them. And they said, I took this medicine and it helped me see my situation. So I wasn't in the same situation. I was really very happy with where things were in my life. But talking to them made me really wonder what it was that could be so revealing.
And at that time, did you do 5-MeO DMT or Bufo, or what was the next step in that?
Yeah, so my friend was part of an entheogenic church that served 5-MeO DMT. And so I sat with his church, I sat with these people that he trusted, and I had my own experience, which was really life-changing. And then I felt like I needed to serve in some way. And the first, I didn't think that was serving medicine, and that unfolded over time.
Take us to that day that you first did 5-MeO DMT in a church setting.
So I came in and I was nervous and also not really thinking much would happen, suspicious and nervous at the same time. And then there was a long ceremony beforehand, and I volunteered to go first because I was very nervous. And I had a unitive experience, which is a little hard to describe. But on the way back, and for the next 24, 48, almost a week, I felt like I could examine things in my life that previously I'd been unable to think about. So I hadn't been able to think about my marriage. I hadn't been able to think about my living situation because changing anything about them would be far too scary. And suddenly I had the space. So this is after the journey. This is in the days after the journey. Suddenly I had the space where I could very, like the clear light of day, look at the facts of my life and say, hey, is this working? What's working? What's not? And figure out what was in alignment. And so that has been one of the biggest gifts the medicine gave me.
Wow. So on that day, you're nervous, you go first. What did happen?
I lay down on a mat in the room. It was a beautiful temple. It was a beautiful temple that was set up, and the ceremony was very, very sacred. And when I sat down on the mat, I inhaled from a device, and about 1 second in, I was blasted into outer space. It was like a rocket ship going all the way up, like further up than I could imagine there being an up. I felt like I was dying, and that was also very scary. And the facilitator had really useful words priming us for that around how safe this medicine was, and no matter what comes up, the key is to surrender. So I thought I was dying. I thought I was dying a long way from home, and that was very, very frightening. And very little of my consciousness was still online, but the part that was heard this surrender word, and I did that, and then suddenly it shifted. It shifted into a unitive, blissful experience of being everything all at once. And in linear time, outside, that lasted for maybe 5 minutes. And then the whole journey of being on this mat was about 45 minutes in linear time. But in my experiential time, it felt like eternity. It felt like an enormously long amount of time.
I remember talking to you years ago, and I think you had mentioned that prior to your experience with 5-MeO DMT, you were an atheist.
I was a materialist, atheist, rationalist. I am and continue to be actually very science-minded. I didn't think there was the possibility of anything other than the physical material world that we can see and codify and name and dissect. So when people would talk to me about God or spirituality or gods or any of these things, I would just shut off. And this experience changed that for me. I left the church a long, long time ago, and suddenly I could feel the presence at churches, at sites of worship, just in the natural world, plants and trees, but pretty much with all manifest creation. I feel the divinity in all of manifest creation.
Wow. So that alone is incredibly life-changing, radical shift.
It is. And it's why service seemed important, right? Because if it's not just, oh, it's me and I need to acquire the things for me and I need to get the things for my family and I need to get settled, right? I was pretty settled, but that was the mindset I was in, not in a cruel way. I've always been someone that is pretty kind and generous, but it was all about me and it's not anymore.
For anybody that's listening that doesn't know what 5-MeO DMT is, because we jumped right in here, what is it?
Oh, 5-MeO DMT is, the way it was found was a secretion from the Sonoran Desert toad, bufo. And the secretion has a lot of different chemicals in it. And one of them is 5-MeO DMT, which is the substance that gives this unitive experience. So it's from toad venom, but it's just one of the compounds that's in bufo.
And one of the reasons people use the 5-MeO DMT synthetic is due to the fact that you have to milk a toad to get the venom, and the ethics of it, what it was doing to the toad populations, as well as the people around those populations. So 5-MeO DMT, here we are, we have this medicine that has many ways of showing up in an experience. And as you mentioned, your experience was 5 minutes to the universe and back, but 45 minutes total. It's a very short experience that can have many different features. So what did you witness?
So I was really lucky that day to witness a wide variety of portrayals. My own portrayal was lying down flat, not moving much. People call being a Buddha. And I was lucky enough that day to witness someone that was a complete Buddha, completely still, took the medicine and then did not move a muscle. I heard from the outside afterwards that I was semi that way. So lied still, but then would throw my arms out and laugh sometimes, cry a little bit sometimes. So a little bit of emotional energy. But I also witnessed some very dynamic people. I witnessed someone that took all of their clothes off and screamed and rolled on the ground. And I witnessed someone that stood straight up and talked and wanted all of us that were holding space, basically treated us like we were divine wisdom keepers. Like was seeing tarot cards in us or gods and goddesses in us and wanted us to speak, and then was clearly taking a lot of meanings from our words. I've never seen that again, but there's a really large range of portrayals, and I was really glad that day to see those different ones, to know that it wasn't always going to be the same.
Was there anything that day that, because 5-MeO DMT can also show up scary, like, oh, is that person breathing? Is that person going to be okay? Anything like that?
Not that day, but I actually haven't seen someone stop breathing, but I've talked to other facilitators that have talked about the experience of watching someone stop breathing. There was someone that was a deep sea diver. So this is not a client of mine,
Right.
but there was someone that was a deep sea diver that could hold their breath. And the facilitator I was talking with said, asked people, hold in the smoke as long as you can. And they did. They started to turn a little blue, but then their body kicked in and had them breathe. So what I've witnessed and what I've heard again and again and again and again is the automatic systems of your body kick in and you breathe again. But I also personally haven't witnessed someone hold their breath like that, for which I'm grateful.
So there's all these different experiences. You and I have actually had a chance to be in medicine space together, which was a gift.
It was a real gift.
We held space for each other at one time. And we also were in a larger group learning facilitation and doing some of the deep work needed before you even consider facilitating. And I just want to speak to the audience here that this is such a profound experience, that it's not like any other psychedelic, that you do have to take caution for experiencing this medicine, and there's still such a need for preparation and integration. I want to switch to like your service and how you serve and how you prepare somebody for a medicine like 5-MeO-DMT.
I think that is one of the most important aspects. For someone to take this medicine, they need to be ready, willing, and able, which are three really different things. Ready is, are you ready for something that might profoundly shift your life? Are you grounded? Are you supported? Do you have a community you can talk to? Are you in a place in your life where something that might radically transform you is a thing that you're going to be able to deal with? Willing is straight up that. Sometimes people are ready for the medicine in their life, and there's a part of them that's unwilling. There might be a part of them that is seeking, a part of them that is really excited, a part of them that really, really wants this opening, and a part of them that is unwilling. When that's the case, there is often a struggle when the medicine hits. And which part is stronger? The part that is willing or the part that isn't? And then able is a physical thing. There's a physical component to this. And people have different tolerances for this medicine. Some people's tolerances are very low, some are very high. Sometimes people have been on psych medicines that make their tolerance even higher. And even when they titrate off, their tolerance is still very high. And they're ready, they're willing, they're excited, and their body just can't surrender. So that's what I look for in preparation. I try to talk to people and assess these things. And I would say it's difficult to assess from the outside. But in preparation, I just try to lay it all out on the line about what might happen and where it might take you, and ask questions about surrender and control and anxiety, and see if those unwilling pieces will talk about, what resources you have in your life for support afterwards. So I think the preparation piece is vital. And I think the reason the experience was so beautiful and opening for me instead of so scary was the really adept preparation that the church I went to had. They've been serving this medicine for a long time. And so I think they have a formula that works pretty well.
In this preparation, so if you think of like originally starting to serve 5-MeO-DMT and what you thought that would be like and what things you thought of for preparation, has your work changed some of that in the sense of like, ooh, I should probably prepare people for this and this, almost like you learn as you go? Is there anything that you now have in your toolbox to offer people that originally you didn't have because you didn't see the numbers of journeys that you have now?
Yeah, 100%. At the beginning, I knew that preparation was important, but I did not realize how vital it was. I think this is a medicine of surrender, and I know that maybe it doesn't make sense and it's a little hard to explain, but I think it's a medicine of surrender. And so being in a place where your body is extremely comfortable and where your emotions, your mental being, your spirit is extremely comfortable. So there's a dynamic between people. I serve one-on-one. I work with a medicine partner, and we serve one person at a time, sometimes two if they're friends or couples or something. But I work in this therapeutic personal container, and so there's a personal connection piece. An unstated thing that is going on in the preparation calls or meetings I'm having with potential clients is, do I feel like our rapport is strong enough? And that is a learned thing. At the beginning, I thought that didn't matter. I was like, I'm going to serve you medicine, and I'm going to do it in a container that's really integrated. And, if your life is in order, we're going to be fine. And then I learned that it's really deeply relational, and that piece is important for people to feel comfortable, to be able to let go.
What is the hardest thing that you have experienced as a medicine woman serving this medicine?
There was a client where we didn't really have that rapport, and sometimes people hit a wall of fear, and often people push through it or allow into it. Often people don't experience this wall of fear. It goes both ways. But she hit this wall of fear, and she just stayed in it the whole time. It was really tricky to watch. It was heartbreaking to watch. It was sometimes frightening. And I said to myself, what do I need to do to have this not be what happens, to have people not in this stuck place? Because it feels like a long time when you're stuck.
Yes, and witnessing it.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from that experience? Is there something that you took away from that? Was it that person might not have been ready, or was it there a way to facilitate it differently? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that probably not ready, and also not with me. Both of those things. Actually, not ready. They were very supported in their life. Not willing. Not willing. And I hadn't been able to discern that when I was talking with them. There was a part that was willing, and there was a part that was really, 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 really terrified. So often when people have deep childhood trauma, there is a really terrified part of them, and that terrified part is going to have a really hard time letting go. And then that's where the relational piece kicks in, right? Can you feel like a safe enough person for that really young part that maybe isn't a part that they're able to get in their consciousness, but is still there inside of them? And like, can you create the conditions for it to be safe for them to surrender? And if not, what I do now is I just work at low doses, because low doses are a different experience and they don't tend to run into that wall. And so now the other thing I changed is pretty much universally with a new client, working with a lower dose first and seeing how that lands, seeing how their body is, and checking in with them afterwards, and just feeling out what's going on with them at that lower dose. I think that's another place
Let's
for
talk
discernment.
about dosage, because I think it's an interesting topic within the 5-MeO DMT field, because everybody's different in it. What is a low dose? What is a mid dose? What is a high dose?
Generally, it's accepted that a high dose is 12 to 20, and a medium is 8 to 12, and a low is 4 to 8. But there are people that have this full release, full unitive experience on
really low doses,
5, 4, yeah. And it's just about where you are. I started offering like a low dose as an introduction,
like
called
3.
handshake.
Yeah.
And I had someone who had the full unitive experience on it, a really big experience that they were in for 40 minutes, not the usual 5 and then sort of back down. No, they were just in. They were completely gone. It was so beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful ceremonies I've witnessed, and it was completely surprising. And because I hadn't expected it, they were sitting up, which is fine, but they just sort of started melting into the floor, and there was some like body positioning that needed to happen because we were not in a position where we thought this is what was going to happen in this moment.
Well, let's share As two medicine women talking about experiences that we've had serving 5-MeO-DMT, what we've seen, what it was like.
It's all over the place. People's portrayals are all over the place. We're talking about now the dissolving dose, but at the very beginning, it hits people's system within seconds. And then there is a fear wall. And some people go through it super quickly, and some people stay in it for a while.
And it's interesting because when you're witnessing that, you can't necessarily tell where somebody is unless it's obvious. I would say for a lot of people, you can't tell where they are. And I don't know if you've had this experience where someone has screamed or yelled or really moved sound, and you're witnessing it and you're thinking, ooh, I don't think they're having a pleasant time. Like, I don't know what's happening for them. And then they come back and how they describe the experience is completely different. It was like, oh my God, that was profound. That was beautiful. And so there's that space I have felt sometimes as like holding the space of like, where are they? Are they good? And I do sometimes notice, and especially early on, that feeling of wanting someone to have a really good experience. I wanted them to have the unitive experience, and then letting go of that, knowing that the medicine knows what they need, or it is just playing out the way it is. But there is that space as a server where you're like, oh, are they good? Are they good? What's happening for them? Do you feel that?
Yes, but that's something that shifted over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was coming here with these tools for healing and awakening, and I was so excited for people to experience them. And I was certain that every time people would have this unitive experience, and they don't. And that is not always what people need. There's so much else that can happen with this medicine. There's so much healing, reliving past memories, emotional release. Like you've seen it, just this catharsis.
Crying, yelling, primitive.
Crying and yelling. I had a woman, you asked about hard things. I also had a woman that took it and then she just sobbed like she was completely bereft. I offer comforting touch often, but this woman, we had talked about it beforehand. She didn't really want to be touched, and I did not get the sense in ceremony she wanted to be touched. So I just stayed separate from this woman that was sobbing as if she had just lost her child, as if like the entire world had fallen down around her. And it was hard to witness. And afterwards, she talked about how healing it was to just be able to cry. To just be able to cry.
Wow. You bringing up for me, that's so hard, right? You're watching someone cry. You want to hold them. You want to hug them.
You want to hold them. You want to hug them. You want to be like, I could be your mom. Oh, it's okay.
Right. It's
okay. You're not the only person in the world. Things will, but none of that. I was like, this is not what this situation is calling for in this moment.
It's interesting. You're bringing up for me a woman who had lost her child.
Oh, wow.
The original plan was not to serve this medicine 5, but it was talked about and on the table as one of the potentials. And so the day of medicine, and you're working with some mushrooms too as well, right? At times. So that was kind of the plan. And it's interesting sometimes when you're hearing an intuitive voice of medicine, and learning to trust that a little bit. And while she was there, I was just like, I think 5 is the way to go. It was like a complete shift in what the plan for the day was, that there was so much grief that the release of 5 might be the best thing. And some people call 5-MeO-DMT or Bufo like psychic surgery, right? That it can go in and move at levels we can't understand really, levels of grief or obstructions. Anyway, she was totally okay with it. We had prepared for it. We had prepared for a long medicine day, which was different because it was short. But she went into primal yelling. I hate this. I hate this. Like everything that she didn't get to express in the death of her daughter. And what was interesting, as well. She was an atheist, reductionist, materialist. And it was so magical to hear how she has only done it once, how magical the experience that followed. I mean, this was years of grief that had really changed her entire life, this loss. And the next day she was like swimming in a river and butterflies just surrounded her. And she just felt like this presence of her child. And then since then has like gone on to drumming circles, breath practices, things that were not on her radar to experience in life. One dose of 5-MeO DMT radically shifted the grief that she carried about such a massive loss in her life. So incredible.
Yeah, I think that that is the astonishing thing, that one dose actually can shift things, and that often related to death. So the medicine can feel like dying, and sometimes that acceptance of it being a part of what is happening in the world is what people need, and that that moment can stick with people. I talked to someone that took this medicine before he lost his mother. His mother was dying of cancer. She asked him to take this medicine because she had had an experience with it herself that had helped make her more sanguine about her own upcoming time. And he talked afterwards about how radically that allowed him to move through his mother's passing with more grace instead of just being stuck in grief. It was grief. It was huge, but it was lighter.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking about another client who had a 13-year-old part. And when we were doing preparation for medicine, this part would come on and it would say, tell this lady, me, tell Princess, I think his 13-year-old part called me, tell Princess that her medicine is not strong enough for me. Those mushrooms aren't going to touch me. And I was like, okay. So this person was working with a few childhood parts and came in for medicine and did a small dose of mushrooms. Interestingly, it was, again, the plan shifted on this day. The mushrooms brought on a little bit of maybe OCD. You know, when you really look at it, it was a child's hypervigilance being really amplified. And this person had an incredible intuitive way. She talked about this guide that guided her. This was fascinating. At one point, I was thinking, I don't know if I would up the dose of mushrooms here. And maybe a low dose of 5 would be supportive. And she sat up and she said, you're thinking of medicines. And I was like, mm-hmm. And she said, my guides said, you're right. What you already gave me, I shouldn't have more of, but the other medicine you're thinking of, that's the way to go. And laid back down. And I'm like, okay. And then sat up at one point and said, the guides wanted me to tell you this. And every time it was like spot on things like that were wild. And so at one point, the point came to make the decision and just gave a low dose of 5. She had come because she had felt dysphoria for years, like just dysphoric. And again, that 13-year-old and a 5-year-old part, you know, she came back and was like laughing and crying at the same time, saying, is this what people feel? Is this what people feel? I had been so disconnected to the access to emotions. And I was like, this is what people feel. And she said, I got my 13-year-old part and my 5-year-old part, and we're like in a circle hugging. It was so amazing. So amazing.
That's really beautiful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like you bringing up parts work. I think parts work goes really well with medicine work.
With the lower doses, are you doing parts work? Is that what's happening?
I have. With lower doses, again, mostly let people have their own journey, but then we'll try to see if they can access a lot of times people will relive a memory and that will be tied to a part, then we can go into that part a little bit and see what that part needs, where that part's living. Like if that part wants to integrate with the whole. I had someone that had a rebel part, and they had a whole visual imagery for where that rebel part was living, that they were down underground, that they were in this sort of like punk cafe, and they liked it there, but they also couldn't leave there. And, you know, like this is where we needed to be pulled to. And so it was a way of like, okay, do we like living here? Is there a different place we could live? Is there a way out of this cafe? Well, first, what's the great stuff about this cafe? Why do we love living in this cafe? Why is this cafe so safe? Underground, underworld, underground. Like I kept using words of like below, right? This part was stuck below. And what it really, 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 really wanted was to be somewhere else and to be held so that it could integrate back with the rest and just be accepted, It was a part that was not okay, that was broken. That was the words that were used, and being okay to not be okay. That has been a theme with medicine work for me too, being okay, not being okay. We had a client that came in and was supremely ready as far as I could tell. Had done a lot of other psychedelics, had done a lot of spiritual work, was already a non-dualist, was just like had this understanding, but hadn't had this experience. Really wanted to have a unitive consciousness experience, but also already believed and was living her life in that way. And she was older. And I was like, oh my goodness, I bet this will be really easy. And
the unpredictability of serving medicine.
Yes. We gave her medicine, and she didn't hit a wall of fear. She hit anger. And she was really angry.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is what we're going to go with. And there's a technique that we do sometimes using a black obsidian rock, which is just a beautiful, big piece of obsidian.
Okay, wait, you have to see something. I got an obsidian toad.
Oh, man, that's the best.
For toad medicine.
That is perfect.
Okay,
that is the
go
best.
ahead. We're at obsidian.
Big black obsidian rock, and like this big. And we gave it to her to hold, and she just screamed into it and yelled into it and screamed. Then we washed it with water, and we took the water outside, and we gave the water to the earth. But she did not have this unitive experience. She had this anger experience and this anger release experience, and it went on and on and on. And afterwards, she thanked us because it's anger she's been holding for a long time that she's never been allowed to express as a woman. It was a lot of different things, but it had to do with having to always suppress her anger, having it never be okay, having that come out in public.
And did she even know, or did it almost come out in medicine and then the realization of the suppression?
It came out in medicine, but she talked afterwards about how that part of her has always been suppressed, and that it wasn't just that moving through that anger and letting it to be released in the world was good, but that it being witnessed was what she needed. She needed it to be witnessed. Like at some point she came down, realized she was screaming, and we're like, yeah, scream.
Right. Louder.
And she was like, oh my God, I can. And we're like, yeah, go for it. Yeah, 100%.
Amazing. So what was it like for you? Like you made the comment, it went on and on. What was it like for you?
I could tell it was really cathartic. I was like, this woman needs this. So it was, honestly, it was beautiful. It felt holy. Yeah. It was completely different than how I expected the day to go. And it was really beautiful.
It's interesting. My first experience was with Bufo. I don't remember it, but the medicine woman said to me, did you know how much rage you have? And I was like, rage? What? And now I've befriended rage. Rage is
Yeah,
such an essential emotion for maybe things from long ago that got suppressed and suppressed. It's a really important emotion that women suppress. It doesn't mean we want to
yeah,
be unleashing our rage out there, but you mentioned something really important in this space. One is being the witness to somebody's grief, rage, anger, unworthiness is a common theme. One of the things I think, as far as a facilitator, you have to be comfortable with those emotions to be able to even hold them for somebody else.
absolutely. Because big emotions come up. Rage is a big one that comes up. People also sometimes have really full sexual expressions. They have ecstatic bliss experiences that are orgasmic. And again, just being able to step back and hold that space and witness and allow it to be beautiful without projecting shame or judgment or
So important.
any
Have
like
you had that experience of holding space for that?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've had numerous clients of different genders and ages. There was numerous different people
Yeah.
clearly in the throes of sexual ecstasy, which is like very tender, very intimate, right?
Beautiful.
It's like a
Yep.
thing that is being shared and witnessed, just allowed to be what it is. It's a part of our lives that is so private and often has a lot of shame around it. But there was a woman that was older, and it was really beautiful to witness an older woman in full sexual expression. The media never shows it. It's not something our culture is into. As a woman myself, I would like to be able to have those experiences also when I'm older. It was really beautiful to
Oh,
witness. I
that's
was
so
like,
beautiful.
I love holding
I
space
have
for
also had
this.
those experiences in medicine.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, again, this is going back, but it was really important to me at the time, for whatever reason, I was called to sit with someone who was a woman, and she didn't work with anybody else, just worked on her own. And so it felt really comfortable to hear that I wasn't aware of it again. I was in ecstasy,
Hmm.
cosmic ecstasy somewhere. I think I always kind of stripped down into like my bra and underwear. I always felt really comfortable in medicine space, again, with a woman. I wonder if like my deep psyche knew I'm safe enough to do that, whether that would
Yeah.
happen if I was with a man. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I definitely think there's a deep psyche piece going on, being like, I am comfortable being naked. I'm comfortable in
Totally
this
safe with her.
expression. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing you said about not being aware when you're in ecstasy, I think most of my clients are not aware that that's what their portrayal is. They're feeling cosmic union. They're feeling
Yeah.
the unity. It's like that's the part of the ceremony that it comes up in.
It's
And I
almost like a
think,
kundalini energy that's
yeah.
at a level that is ecstasy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
There's the original experience that you have this day where someone gets the 5-MeO DMT, but what do you see after? And what have you seen in the change in clients' lives?
Yeah, that has been one of the aspects of this work that is so heartening
Oh my
and
God.
makes me feel like it's what I want to keep doing. So I had a client that was in a pretty contracted point in his life. He was a spiritual seeker. He had found a particular spirituality that was working for him, but he also was unhappy, closed down, really seeking, right? There was a seeking energy to him. He's a former addict. I need someone else to tell me what the right thing is. That was the energy I was getting from him. He was a beautiful man. And he was also one of the most frightened people that I had worked with. There's a lot of ceremony leading up. The ceremony leading up was beautiful. But when we got to the moment of inhaling the medicine, he just froze, stuck still, completely frozen. I was like, okay, do you want to go slow? Do you not want to do this? And just completely frozen, like no input. And I was like, listen, let's just meditate. Let's do some chanting together. Let's not take any medicine. let's not take any medicine. This is successful even without medicine. No medicine needs to happen. And suddenly that was like a light switch. And he was like, actually, yes. And afterwards, he talked about having a young childhood experience that was stuck in him of freezing when he needed to act. And that had been a thing that had happened to him again and again in his life. This freezing reaction. He was really grateful to have overcome it. And he had a very blissful full release experience. It was very beautiful to witness. And he kept saying sort of, oh my God. It was clear he was tying it back to his spirituality, but he was making it even bigger than the particular religion he had found. And then we had an integration call, and that was really beautiful. He got in touch with me a year later, and he had completely changed his life. He had let go of the particular religion he was part of, which was a little too narrow for him. He felt like he could now answer his own questions with regards to spirituality. He saw the divinity in everything.
Whoa.
And he had changed his life to dedicate to service. He was going back to school, and he was going to become a professional, a therapist, a professional in that world.
I remember in the beginning too, like serving people and being a little like, oh, I hope they're ready for their whole life to change, because I don't know how that's going to happen. And having, like you said, a year later or months later, most of my clients are clients that stay on for a year of doing integration work for a year, 2 years. I have clients that have been with me for years. It's so interesting to continue to watch their lives change. Someone who's like a top executive at some big corporation suddenly like teaching yoga instead.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so happy, or moving out of relationships that were harmful. I had this one man who just was really in love with somebody, really, and had been in love for years. Something had happened between them and he shut his heart down, but was still in love with this woman, and did the medicine and realized like his shutdown had really to do with child parts. There were some triggers within the relationship, but then that healed. It's such a gift to see the changes over time with just one dose of 5-MeO-DMT.
Yes. I've had a client, and I've heard of other cases of people with treatment-resistant depression. But I'm talking about my own client, a woman with treatment-resistant depression that, it's one of these like modern tragedies, right? Like her life on the surface looks really great, and nonetheless she couldn't feel it. Just couldn't feel it. And then there was this self-anger, right? Like, why, when the facts of my life, if I narrate them to someone, they'll be like, you got everything. You know, why can't I feel it? Why can't I get up in the morning? Why is the world gray? Why? So on top of the fact of it, that she's feeling gray and depressed, she's feeling frustrated and self-recriminatory about it. And she had never had any psychedelics before. And so this was a big leap, but also she really wanted something to shift. And again, it was a single dose. And the next morning, she felt like she could take a walk and be with her kid. And suddenly those things were accessible. Suddenly those things like brought her joy instead of not. And it's been persistent.
It's mind-blowing. It's so hard to describe, actually, how mind-blowing. And I say that with caution. And I constantly say, it's not a red pill. And yet the shifts are mind-blowing.
It's not a silver bullet, right?
No.
It's not that this will happen to every single person, but also it does. It happens, and I have seen it, and it gives me like hope in the world, and it makes me want to keep serving this medicine.
Mm-hmm. So in your service, you mentioned you work one-on-one and you work with somebody else. Do you turn clients away?
I guess there's two things. There's contraindicated medications. And so that's sort of like this easy case, right? It's like, okay, you're great.
Right.
Maybe you're ready, willing, and able even, but you're on a contraindicated medication. But I also had a case of meeting a client in person that definitely needed help. I could see why they were seeking medicine, but they didn't have a support structure in their life. They didn't have family or a partner or a friend they were close with. And this medicine can be really ungrounding.
Very.
And they were a heavy cannabis user. And cannabis was what was getting them through the day to day. That's great. But this medicine can change cannabis to be something where you're experiencing this medicine instead. Like cannabis can be something that causes reactivations. And so I thought, this person doesn't have a support structure, and I may be taking away their day-to-day support by giving them this medicine. Like, this just doesn't feel in alignment to serve. And it was tough
Yeah.
because they really wanted this, and they
Really needed it.
they needed something. But
so let's just pause there for someone that doesn't know what that means, that if you take 5-MeO-DMT and you're a cannabis user, what is reactivation and how has it shown up for your clients or yourself?
Sure. Reactivation is when you're having an experience like you're on the medicine. It usually happens when you're falling asleep, but melatonin or cannabis also can cause it. They don't universally. A lot of people never experience them. I've never experienced them myself. But because I know it's a real possibility, I try to be cautious around it. Yeah.
I'm going to have you back, and I'm going to have you back with the person that you serve with.
Sure.
And what I'd love to talk about, because a piece that's interesting to discuss from the underground is what it's like to work in partnership, all the dynamics that come up in partnership, more about the medicine. Yeah, what is it like for you to work underground?
Yeah, I wish I could work above ground. That's what I'd like to do. I have no particular connection or desire to be an underground medicine worker. I wish this was something that was legal and available because I think there's a lot of healing potential in it. But what it's like to work underground, things are word of mouth, which that part's actually sort of beautiful because it means that clients come with a little bit of trust already. But it also means that there's a fear element lurking in the background, a sense of unsafety lurking in the background. It means clients coming to me sometimes have that, right? They're wondering, like, oh, is it legal? Am I going to get in trouble in my job? Are people going to test for this and find it, right? It brings in this big specter of fear that I do not think is needed in this medicine.
Also, I would add to that too, that, if you're doing this work at Johns Hopkins or with clinical trials, you're supported by a whole network of people. And there is burnout. There is need to talk about what you're experiencing as a facilitator, or to have a level of like supervision and just support, just community around it. And so I would say that's another thing. And you build it in the underground. There's huge communities in the underground supporting each other, but they have all this backing behind them to be a scaffolding to hold anything that does arise. I'd say that's another thing sometimes that it feels.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. So I have a large community. I feel very well supported. I have a number of different peer groups that do case studies that talk about different aspects of this medicine. I'm in groups of multi-medicine facilitators and in groups of facilitators that just do 5. And I feel very well connected and well supported. And that has been really vital. And also, at the beginning, because this is underground work, that was less true. So I had a cohort, which is not nobody, but it's not the same level of support that somebody starting out would have if they were working above ground. And I think having peer support is really, really essential. You can talk to people. You can have a much larger range of experience because you have both your own experiences and all of their experiences, and you can talk through things. And it's a newer medicine, and it's really expansive. So there are a lot of different aspects of it.
Well, as you said, it can be destabilizing. Yeah, the cohort, the importance of having community around you, essential. That's what I was going to say. That I'd love to have the person that you work with on to talk more about what you experience together, but also what trainings are needed, what community is needed, what trainings did you do to get ready to serve 5-MeO DMT. So maybe we'll talk about that.
Sure, I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else today that you'd like an audience member to know who's thinking about this medicine?
I really want people to know that the intention you come in with it matters. So if you're thinking about doing this medicine, the two questions I'd ask myself are, do I feel like I can surrender? And what is my intention? What am I hoping to get out of it? And can I let that go too?
Do you play music? Do you talk about with a client your ceremonial or non-ceremonial practices and how you serve?
Yeah, I do. I'm happy to describe my ceremony if you want. Yeah, I always do. I always describe it.
Yeah. So why don't we do that when you come back?
Sure.
So you can both talk about the parts that you play in the ceremony.
Yeah, because it was co-crafted. Absolutely. Like he played an essential role. He crafted. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an amazing to have this opportunity to talk.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly grateful. This is dear to my heart, as you know.
I know. Me too. Me too. I hope we get to sit in medicine space again together.
Yes, we will. It will happen.
And having conversations too. Like I had a conversation with Charles Eisenstein and Robert Forte about, is there a way to reclassify all these medicines as sacred medicines and like change even the way that the legalization is about to go, but have these be under a new classification of medicine so that there's access.
Yeah.
We all need to get together and do that.
That'd be huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rose.